The show focused on delivering beneficial information on everything to do with products and services that can improve your life. This is Experts on Call on AM 650.
And welcome back to Quay Pacific's Talk About Strata. Tony Giventu and Sterling Fox joined in studio by lawyer Paul Mendez from L'Espérance Mendez in Vancouver. We're talking about strata projects, big projects. You see them all the time, all over the city, buildings wrapped in scaffolding, and you know that those people in that building and that strata complex are forking over some big chips for a big renovation project. In this case, Paul, Tony has brought a specific example, and it's a good one too. It's repiping of an older building, close to 30 years old, on the west side of the city of Vancouver, 128 units. So now we get to the point where, okay, the Strata Council has been made aware of a big problem. It's going to cost a lot of money to fix. In this case, they're going to have to repipe this entire condo building. So, Tony, what are the protocols or procedures once the Strata Council is made aware of the problem and has some kind of strategy to deal with it devised? What do they do next? What do they have to do, and what should they do?
Well, Sterling, there's kind of a basic step-by-step in major projects that kind of keeps you in sequence and out of trouble.
Okay.
And I think the first thing that the Strata Council wants to do is they want to have an information meeting with the owners, and they want to have a competent professional, so an engineer who does repiping of buildings,
Okay.
At the meeting to be able to talk to the owners about facts. Because what ends up happening is if you don't have a competent, independent professional, all kinds of speculation starts. Everybody has a different opinion on how they can do it. They all have a brother or a friend or someone who can come in and do it at a cheaper price,
Sure.
or everything can get resolved. Always ends up in a disaster. Really what they need is they need some impartial information that they can rely upon, that's fairly factual in base, to be able to inform the owners what the condition is, what the options are, and a sense of kind of what some of the costs are going to be. That's kind of a basic thing. So they do that first.
Okay, and Paul, this would be the legal advice that you would give to that Strata Council, saying, okay, you've got to get together with your owners, you must present them with the problem, but don't you do it. Bring someone who absolutely understands the problem from the ground floor up, literally, and who can do almost a PowerPoint presentation on the whys and the how muches, right?
Yeah, just give them a sense of it, right? And and I think it's a time where this is the time where the Strata Council is going to engage legal counsel. You're going to have somebody that, if you have any questions, I can call you, I can get an answer, we know some assistance. The next step is they need to get a general meeting together to approve the fees for engineering and legal.
So you have an information meeting, and you don't try and get it all done in that first crack, right?
It'll blow up in your face.
Right, just let them go away and let the dust settle, and then come back and see how they feel about it.
And let the owners then know we're going to call a general meeting. So we'll have a special general meeting just to approve, out of our contingency usually, we'll approve so much money for the engineer's work, the consultant that we hire, and for legal services, because they'll work in parallel. One of the things that happens is once the owners have done that, what'll occur is the engineer will create specifications and documentation that can be used for bidding on the job.
Okay, right.
So this is where your legal advice really needs to get involved. There are a lot of pitfalls and minefields around the tendering process that strata corporations can find themselves into some serious liability.
Okay.
Especially on a project of $1.5 million. Unfair bidding processes, omitted or missed information, terms and conditions that you want inserted into the contract that have a real material effect on the contract that need to be part of the tendering process. Payment schedules, specifications of work, how the work is mounted, how everything is going to be managed in the process. All of this information needs to be part of the tendering process.
Sure. Now, Paul, as the lawyer involved in this, what would your benchmark be? Is there, for example, in the Condo or the Strata Act, some rules for procedures for tendering and all that kind of stuff, or is it just generally accepted good practices?
Yeah, that is, there's a whole area of tendering law, and it's not in the Strata Property Act. And because the process of tendering can expose the strata to liability by unsuccessful bidders, or any bidder where the tendering process is canceled, it's always a good idea, if you are sending a project out to tender, to have it reviewed by a lawyer before that call to tenders is issued.
Okay.
Because there are many cases where unsuccessful bidders have successfully sued owners, be they stratas or other entities, where they have been able to argue that the bid that was accepted was non-compliant with the tendering documents.
Oh, so sort of sour grapes ends up in court, and sometimes sour enough to win the day.
Yes, and what you'll notice if you were to chart these types of cases and claims, when the economy is booming, they're very rare. Because if I don't get your job, I'm going to find another job tomorrow.
Right.
When the economy is flatlining or declining, if I don't get your job, and I think I have a chance of squeezing a couple of $100,000 off of you for lost profits, I'll take a chance.
Okay.
And you see a real increase in that litigation right now.
Well, and this is where strata councils get themselves into trouble. The bidding process should be sacred. Absolutely no one should breach the rules of the bidding process, especially not the Strata Council.
Right.
When all those bid documents come in, they must be held in absolute confidentiality. The Strata Corporation needs to make their assessments based upon the conditions of the tendering. They need to make their decisions based upon that with legal advice that, they have managed these risks, that they aren't exposed in any way, and they don't disclose the specific bidding documents of specific contractors.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Because the moment you do that and you start sharing information with other parties, you breach privacy, you breach proprietary situation of contractors.
And as you said earlier, somebody's got a brother or a cousin
Absolutely.
or somebody who could probably do a better job for cheaper price. And, if you just give them a little information here, he could come back with a bid that would embarrass the rest of those people.
Well, and it's whether you're the Strata Council or the property manager that gives somebody a little bit of a nod on how to get the inside on this job.
Yeah.
Bad practice.
Right.
You're going to pay for it, and you're going to pay for it dearly with one of these challenges, because there really is a lot of risk exposed to the Strata Corporation.
Paul,
in this process.
is there a kind of an insider info illegality that comes into the tendering process? You can't do insider trading in the stock market. Is it illegal to feed inside information to would-be people who are submitting bids in a tendering process?
Yeah, I would say there's no certain code on it, but the general view is that the bidding process has to be fair.
Right.
If a strata issues a call for tenders, it has a duty to treat all bidders fairly.
Okay.
So not disclosing the same information to all bidders would, in my view, be a clear violation of that.
And a juicy reason for a lawsuit.
And a juicy reason for a lawsuit
Absolutely.
if it's discovered. And how it's discovered typically is the unsuccessful bidder will learn about the successful bidder's bid and see that it does not comply with the bid contracts. Or a very common one is after the bids are received, the council prefers one bidder, but their price wasn't the lowest, so they go to that bidder and go, here's what they said they would do the project for. What can you do? And they'll revise.
Can you improve your price a
Yes.
little? Because if you can, we'd prefer you to do the job.
That's right, and that
is illegal?
Bid shopping. It's called.
Okay.
And it is contrary to the law of bidding and tendering. Now you can structure your call for tenders to allow you a whole bunch of flexibility.
Which is why you should have a lawyer when you before you start accepting bids.
True, but also, the more flexibility you give yourself, the more risk there is to bidders. So you're going to have probably fewer qualified bidders want to bid on a project that you can just at any time tear up the process.
So there's some fine lines to tread here, Tony.
Well, and sometimes the more flexibility you give yourself, the more cost you're going to incur in these contracts.
Okay.
Right? And so you'll find that the bids are going to come in higher because they're trying to accommodate for some of the potential flexibilities and try to manage this system.
Well, typically now in this, let's use our west side building in need of a repiping job. They've come to terms with the fact that it has to be done. They know it's going to cost $1.5 million at least. And you've got to leave room for those ever so fun overruns at the end of a project like this. So now, typically, when they put this thing out for tender, how many bids should a Strata Council expect to entertain?
I don't think that it's easy to actually assess, because a lot of it has to do with how busy and active the market is.
Okay,
right?
as Paul was alluding to earlier.
If it's busy and contractors have lots of work, you might find you only get one or two bids, and they might come in quite high because there's a lot of work. And if we get it, it's a great project, we'll do it. If we don't, It's okay. We have another project.
Sure.
The market for construction right now is really quite good for multifamily developments. If you're looking for contractors to do construction, there are a lot of contractors bidding on work right now. So it's a good market for the buyer. The buyer
okay.
has good access to price, material, resource control. The downside of that is people make hasty decisions. Paul was talking about, if you bid shop, you take your lowest bid and go to somebody else and say, if you can match this price, we'll give you the contract.
Sure.
And that blows up in your face. You can pretty much guarantee it'll blow up in your face because out of the 7 council members, there's going to be 1 council member at least who's going to be very unhappy with that process.
Of course.
Right. And they're probably going to leak the information to someone else. So, so the strata corporations, there are no secrets in a strata. Really, there aren't. And so if you plan on doing something that is going to be questionable from a point of legality, pretty much predict that somebody's going to learn about it and you're going to be in some difficulty.
Wanted to ask you both a money question. Tony, you've alluded to the contingency fund. Every strata council in the province is supposed to have some kind of cash in the kitty contingency standby fund. In the case of a repair job in the 7 figures, $1.5 million at least, the contingency fund's probably not going to be anywhere near that. So by law, in this building of 128 units, what would a contingency fund typically be? How much cash would be on hand on any given day?
This strata corporation actually realizes they're a 28-year-old building, and they've actually been planning for some major repairs.
So they've been smart about it.
Well, they have $800,000 in their contingency fund.
Wow.
So they're going to be able to fund half of this project out of the contingency fund to cover their fees. And the other thing is, because they don't have to go to the owners for a special levy to approve things like the consulting engineer and legal fees.
Because they've got money for it.
They've got money for it. They can approve it out of the contingency fund. Owners are much happier to approve that work.
Sure.
Right? And so what happens
Not going to cost me anything. Essentially, I've already paid for it.
Exactly. And what happens, and I can see it from a homeowner's perspective. They're trying to manage their personal cash. What happens with homeowners is if there are places we can cut corners to minimize the special levies, we're going to do it on things like legal and consultants.
Right.
Those are the places we start cutting corners, and that's how we end up getting ourselves into a lot of trouble. So these guys are actually in really great shape. They've hired legal. They have a consulting engineer on site, and they are working out specifications. But now they've come up to the next step, which is the chicken or egg problem that we have in the industry.
Which is?
Well, contractors for major projects are reluctant to bid on Strata Corporation contracts unless the Strata Corporation has approved the funds first.
Okay.
Or have the funds approved for a special levy. And the reason for that is
all the money, Tony, or in this case, half the money's in cash sitting in the bank.
The difficulty from the contractor's perspective is they're going to spend a fair amount of time looking at this tender document, coming on site, looking at the building and putting a bid together.
Yes.
Right. And it's not getting the bid because somebody else got it is not the problem. The thing that contractors are really reluctant about is the Strata haven't approved this project yet. Mm-hmm. Why would we bid on a project the Strata haven't approved? Right. And what if the Strata doesn't approve it, or what if they go another 2 or 3 years and we did all this work? So there's some strategies that Strata councils and Strata corporations can look at. They can look at when you do the specifications. The engineer should be able to come up with a generous estimate of what the costs are. Okay. The Strata can approve a special levy and the contract for that overall cost, but set it out 90 days or 120 days. So the owners can approve it, but the money's actually not collected till the work actually starts. Mm-hmm. But here's one of the problems. The minute you approve that money, the public knows about that money because these documents are not we'd like to say they're private, but they're not private. Mm-hmm. Everybody now sees that the estimate for the job is $1.8 million.
Right.
So you now have all 5 contractors who are bidding on it.
Dollar signs in their eyes.
Suddenly all looking at $1.8 million,
right,
having to compete based around who's going to get the project. But, it is a backwards bit of an inverted problem. The upside of Strata corporations having the money in their contingency funds so they don't have to have special levies is they're funded. So approving the project and approving that the funds be expended as necessary doesn't require at the same kind of special levy cash
It's almost
value.
a rubber stamp, isn't it?
It's almost a rubber stamp at that point. And that's
right.
One of the things that Strata corporations will start to realize as their contingency funds get larger is that when you're dealing with major projects, you have the money. We've approved the project. We will, after we've received the final bids, approve the capital that's necessary from the reserve funds to do it. Mm-hmm. So the contractor isn't in a situation of wondering whether the Strata is going to collect the money or not. we have the money. That's the issue, right? And so if the owners themselves might just vote against this because they can't afford to pay. That issue doesn't come up when you're talking about using contingency funds. And so, economically, it does have a significant impact on what the next phase of the project is going to be.
Need to take a quick break here. He's Tony Juventu. I'm Sterling Fox. Our guest is lawyer Paul Mendez. You're listening to Quay Pacific's Talk About Strata on AM 650, and we'll be right back.
Delivering relevant and beneficial consumer information. This is Experts on Call. And there's more still ahead on AM 650.